All right. Hi, everyone. Let's see that some people are still connecting. Uh, just to introduce myself, my name is Natalie Vihodet. I'm a tutor here at Kweller Prep. I am also a junior at the University of Pennsylvania and a Hunter graduate class of 2022. So Francis Kweller actually cannot make it today, so I'm taking over this webinar. I have experience teaching Hunter essays for years, and today that's exactly what we will be going over. We will be going over the structure of the Hunter essay. We'll be talking about what they look for in students and how to really get the most out of it and how to really prepare for it. So I'm actually going to share screen now. I'm going to request that all of you guys just keep your videos off, please, just because it might be a little bit distracting for other viewers. So I'm just going to kind of share what we have in our syllabus and really go over it a bit more in depth. So let's just do that. And once in a while, I will, of course, just admit more people to the meeting. So let's see. Okay, so as we can see, we have the Hunter essay homework. This is if you take the winter crash course that we have coming up at Kweller. So the way the Hunter essay works is it's a handwritten essay that is 2 to 4 double-spaced pages. And yeah, when you're doing the test, I do recommend that you, or at least when you practice, you double space so that it's easier for people to correct your work and it's easier for yourself to correct your work. Within the test itself, you can always request more paper if you feel like you need more space. So that's great. And this essay should take approximately 1 hour to write. And these essays are like almost always personal narratives. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go over the prompt and really talk about what the purpose of the Hunter essay is. So let's see. Here we have a variety of prompts that are given by Kweller Prep, but a lot of them have actually been based off of prompts that were given to Hunter students or were given on the Hunter test in the past. As you can tell, there's a lot of like personal questions. For example, what you like the most about New York City? What is your favorite subject? What is the best movie you ever saw? Right? All of these prompts aren't really as simple as they may sound, especially if you're a student watching this. Don't just give a face value answer. The purpose of the Hunter test is to really, or the purpose of the essay is to allow administration to pick out the types of students that they want to see at Hunter. What does that mean? They're looking for students who are, first of all, intellectually curious. You need to convey that you're always willing to learn. Your essays, apart from just answering the question, should show some kind of reflection and some kind of deeper thinking about the subject. You can say that your favorite subject is English because you read super fast and you like reading all of these different stories. That's nice, but that's kind of missing the point of what the essay is trying to get at. They're trying to get at the fact that you like to learn something new, the fact that you are capable of reflecting on something new that you did learn. So I think that that's a key aspect of it. The next thing that they look for is someone who brings a unique perspective. So that can include an unconventional essay, that can include a new perspective. For example, if you have a hobby or if you have an interest that you think sets you apart from other people or a core experience that other people probably didn't have, that is one way to set yourself apart. Another thing that the Hunter admissions kind of want to see are people from maybe like quote unquote non-traditional backgrounds. So at least when I was a student, and to my knowledge, it's sort of continuing. They are trying to make the test more accessible for more people. The cutoff for this year was a bit lower than it was for previous years. So that means that there's a much wider variety of students with a much wider variety of perspectives from around New York City. So they're looking for something like that. Thirdly, they're looking for someone who is connected to New York City. There are a few New York City-based prompts, and the answers to those prompts should probably be rooted something outside your neighborhood, or it should be rooted something, again, away from like purely touristy areas like Times Square, because those are kind of places that everyone knows. If they do have something about New York City, maybe share something, an adventure you took, some kind of um, new thing that you learned, new site you saw, if you're interested in a particular museum, or if you're interested not necessarily in a museum, but in some kind of a landmark or some kind of a setting that most other people probably haven't been to, or if it's a if you know type of place, that would be great. Or something that's like very personally significant to you. Um, I think that those are the main three. Again, just to reiterate, they are looking for students who are intellectually curious. They're looking for students who are reflective, who can look back at their own lives and own past experiences and kind of draw conclusions and take lessons to the future. They are looking for unique perspectives. This could be just like personal background, or it could just be in terms of interests and hobbies and knowledge. And finally, they're looking for someone who can navigate New York City and who is like a quote unquote city kid and just interested in learning about their environment in general. All of these things make these prompts a lot more complicated, obviously, because you can't just say something and give three reasons why you like it, the way that most schools, to my knowledge, or at least in my experience, teach you how to write essay. It's like answer, reason one, reason two, reason three. These prompts are asking you to write a story. So let's go through an example. Maybe something like number 10, describe your dream house. A lot of people could potentially read this prompt and interpret it in a very face value way where they say, okay, the first aspect of my dream home is it has to be large. The second aspect of my dream home is it has to have a large closet. The third aspect is it needs to have a pool. That kind of doesn't really say anything about you. Like, yes, that sounds like a super nice house, but that's not what admissions is looking for. They're looking for maybe your dream house is next to a horse stable. And then the rest of your essay is telling a story about how you went horseback riding or how that's like a super cool hobby for you. And maybe you grew up outside of New York City, like for a couple of years, and you learned to ride horses, something like that, which tells administration something about you. Moreover, your essay will get into the structure of the essay later, but it should definitely tell some kind of a story where at the end of the story, you can reflect on your actions, you can reflect on your choices. And a good tip that at least I received when I was studying for these essays is always ask yourself, so what? I'll repeat, always ask yourself, so what? When the reader reads your essay, by the end of it, they should know that your essay matters in some way. I could read 2 to 3 pages of a beautiful description of a house. Okay, so you should be able to tell your reader concretely why it is that your essay is important, why it is that the conclusion that you drew from your experience is important. It should be something that's maybe they could apply to their life. It could be something that you took as a general good lesson. Either way, your essay should be a purpose. After reading your essay, the reader should feel like they spent their time in a meaningful way. Not that, oh my God, I have to read 500 essays from these students. I can't wait until I'm done. It needs to be somewhat meaningful and you need to somewhat impress them. The admissions, I mean. Here are kind of more specific problems, or not prompts. Um, I think this one, reflect on a time when you challenged a belief or idea. What prompted you to act, and would you make the same decision again? This one I think is very straightforward in how and what it's asking you to do. And I think that this one is a bit more straightforward in the sense that um, you know that you should reflect on something, you know what you should write about, and you know that at the end of the essay, you should have like some sort of deeper meaning or some sort of deeper takeaway. And also, if you challenge a belief or idea, I think that that inherently shows something good about your character, and that you stand up for what is right and you're steadfast in your beliefs. Um, if this were all that the hunter prompts threw at you, and this is a very good list. Hopefully you guys sign up for classes, you'll be given the syllabus and you could practice. So this is actually a part of series on essay homework. Definitely do practice essays on these. I'll get into like overall strategy later. But you know, if it were just those prompts, it would be easy enough. What Hunter has started to do is they realize that people are preparing for their tests. They're realizing that people are preparing for the essay portion very well. And so to kind of, I guess, throw a new challenge for students and also for companies like Kweller Prep and other places, they started to assign visual essays. So they would give you a picture and they would say, describe what is in this picture. Maybe it's a little bit more abstract than the picture here. Um, so yeah, I would practice with the first prompt using the pictures above, describe how one of the objects can be meaningful to the family in the picture above. This one is another tricky prompt because you as a student are probably very smart. You're probably very logically thinking. You can say, okay, well, the picture in the middle is a drawing clearly made by a child. So it's important to the family because it shows the strength of family bonds. But that's like not really an essay. I said all that in maybe one sentence or two. I'm not sure. But that's clearly not an essay, number one. Number two, remember the purpose of the Hunter essay prompt. The purpose of the prompt is to get admissions to learn something about you as an individual. So merely describing what you see in the picture is not enough. You should like take this prompt and somehow tie it back to yourself. For example, um, let's say instead of the picture, because that might be straightforward, there's the tea kettle, right? Or the teapot. So if I were a student and I were writing the Hunter essay, this is how I would approach the topic. I would say that the picture of the teapot is probably meaningful to the family. Um, because like I would actually start the essay differently. I would start off talking about how I'm sitting at the table and staring down into my golden glass of tea, and I look around and my family members are like, you know, talking to one another, talking over each other. It's just the spirit of energy and bonding and whatever else I want it to be, and this happens every single Friday evening, right? And then I could go on to say in my first paragraph that the tea kettle is probably meaningful to the family because, in my experience, in my culture, like everyone, the family, meets together on Friday nights and just spends time with each other and just has dinner with each other. So, see how the thing about the family in the picture took up, again, maybe a sentence or two, and how the rest of the essay is talking about myself and my own experiences. That is what your goal is. So, just to recap, if you're given a general prompt like this, find a way to tie it back to yourself. Find an experience that you had that could be applicable to whatever picture it is that they're showing you. And then you should tie in the prompt. Obviously, you should answer the prompt. Like, answer it in a concrete sentence if you must, right? You should definitely have an answer. But the majority of the time should be spent talking about you. The admissions officers want to know you, right? So that is a way to do it. This is what the second prompt kind of asks, right? Describe an object that is meaningful to you and your family. That's just the dumbed down version of number one. Number two, this prompt number two, is the conclusion that you should be drawing from prompt number one. I hope that this makes sense. So of course, if there are any questions, like you could always email Francis, you could always email myself. So yes. Let's see. This is another picture. So again, another prompt. I won't go over it again, but using the pictures above, describe what one of the objects mean to you. This one is the straightforward one where you don't really have to elaborate too much on or you don't need to think out of the box too much to get it to relate to you. This one, describe a first day of school using one of the objects presented above. That one's a little trickier. That one you need to extrapolate a little bit. It's not just any random first day of school. It should be something that is meaningful to you. Why? Because again, admissions cares about you and they want you to be a particular type of student. So let me just check the chat really quickly. So someone asked if you should split up the two prompts into two different paragraphs. That's not really what I'm saying. I remember I was the first year that Hunter introduced having two prompts. So you do not address both prompts. You pick one prompt and then you write about it. So yeah, that's the advice. You usually just pick one prompt and write something about it. My point is more so that at least in this example with 1 and 2, like 2 is what you should be writing about anyway, in any case. 1, like the second prompt is kind of hidden within number 1, right? Because the first prompt is asking you just to write about some other family. The second prompt is explicitly saying, write about yourself. You should be writing about yourself in any scenario. And number 1 is just a little bit trickier. The second prompt is what it's really asking you. Number 1 is what they give you on the test. I hope that that makes sense. But if they tell you to address both prompts, like, then obviously do it. Do what the instructions say, no matter what. Read the instructions. But in my experience, they sometimes ask you to pick one prompt and out of 2 prompts to write about. So let's see. Okay, we have a few more questions. So I can't really answer questions about specific weeks, I don't think. I think that that's, if you take the class, your instructor should tell you that. No matter what, yes, you should follow the directions first and foremost. Yeah, if the directions tell you to use one paragraph, then yes, use one paragraph, but definitely within one paragraph, find a way to relate it to yourself. Yes, and finally, how important is formal language? Does Hunter care if you use contractions? So, I don't know if they prioritize that, like formal language over content or what you're writing about. I would say, as a general rule, avoid contractions, just because it elevates your essay. I would say you should veer towards more formal language. Again, we'll go over this in a little bit about grammar and spelling, but formal language just means, don't address the reader casually. Don't use you. Oh yeah, like, I picked up the remote control or something. Don't use slang in your essays either, because within general writing, that makes your writing dated. Those like slang words change all the time. You want a nice clean essay that could always be read at any point in time. Also, the people reading your essay, which is again something we'll talk about later, are Hunter English teachers. Some of them are really hip and up to date. A lot of them are maybe your parents' age. So, probably don't use any slang or any language like that. I would say, yes, stick to formal. So let's see. Last 2 questions, and I'll move on in the interest of time. Okay, so these are 2 good questions. So the first question is, how long should this paragraph be? I think, again, depends on the time remaining for the exam and how long you need to communicate the essay. I don't have a set number of sentences. However long you need to communicate your main message is however long the paragraph should be. I would say paragraph should probably not exceed 7 or 8 sentences, and they can be long sentences. Yeah, but there's no set answer for that. And the last question before we move on is, does Hunter deduct points for incorrect grammar, incorrect spelling? So that's not, again, to my knowledge, that's not how that works. To my knowledge, it is 3 English teachers they all read the same essay, and then they all vote. If all 3 of them say, yes, take this kid into Hunter, like that essay goes in the yes pile, If all three of them say no, that essay goes in the no pile. And then if there's like a 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3, it gets put in the maybe pile, and then they like go over it again. It's not really done off of a rubric, and it's not extremely clear. And if there were a rubric, they clearly would not make that rubric public, because they know that people are just going to like train on it. So to answer the question, like, there aren't really any points. It's just generally, is it well written? So don't think of it as like points where you get points off of a rubric. Think of it as, is this a cohesive story? And is it generally well written? So that means like avoid mistakes with grammar and spelling, though obviously like one spelling mistake is not going to kill you. So moving on to this poem essay. Poems are notoriously hard to read, especially because a lot of elementary schools and middle schools don't really cover poems in the curriculum. So I think that a lot of students are generally caught off guard when they do read poems. I wouldn't think of poems as anything too crazy. Just think of it as when you read a poem, think of it as a very visual type of writing. A lot of poetry uses metaphors. It uses a lot of descriptions. And think about what certain things seem to represent. That includes kind of in preparation, maybe read poems, buy a book of poems, not necessarily something like Shel Silverstein. Shel Silverstein writes for maybe people in 3rd grade, 4th grade. Some of his poems are very meaningful even to adults. That is not the type of poetry I would necessarily recommend as practice. I actually do need to think about what I would recommend. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I'm sure that there are classic poems. Maybe like with the authors that Kweller Prep gives you, see if they have other works and see if you can understand what it is that they are saying. So yeah, I think there's another poem called The Path Less Taken. That one's another classic. Definitely see if you can read it. Yes. So here are the directions. So yeah, and you have a choice of prompts. In the instructions, it says each question. Usually in the Hunter test, they say like pick one, but these instructions say each question in using one paragraph. So choose one line from the poem and explain how the author uses imagery, and using vivid sensory details, recall a time that changed your perspective on something. So usually in the actual Hunter essay, they would only give you maybe prompt one, right? And like I said, maybe your first instinct is to be super dry and super face value. You're going to explain the prompt, or you're going to explain this verbatim and use proof from the you're going to use proof from the poem itself. But like I said, they know that you are able to read. If you've gotten to the point where they are reading your essay, that means that you did decently well on the reading section, or at least enough to pass a certain threshold. So they know that you can read. Again, they won't always write out prompt number 2 explicitly, right? But you should know that whatever prompt they give you, you should probably relate it to your own experience somehow. You should probably say something about yourself. And that is, like, if anything, the one key message that you should get from this webinar. The Hunter essays are made to explain yourself. The Hunter essays are a way for admissions to learn something about you. So let's see. This is another poem essay. I won't really go over it too much. This essay homework, writing essay. This is an example of a pretty good essay. I think it's a little bit, I think honestly, even though this essay is for a prompt, it's a pretty good essay overall. Certainly on the Hunter test, you won't have time to write an essay this long, nor should you elaborate on the capuchin monkeys. You probably shouldn't elaborate on the capuchin monkeys for 3 paragraphs. It should maybe be 1 paragraph, and then you start with, entering elementary school or something. Like, I often felt like this. Anyways, I would say it's a generally good model if you want to read it, but this is, asking a direct question, a face value question, and then embedded in it you should also talk about how you adapted to newer difficult circumstances. Again, key lesson. A hunter administration wants to learn about you. So another question. So yes, the Hunter essay, if you came in late, like don't worry, they might ask you to write about a poem. My year, they gave us a passage and then they said write an essay based off of this passage. So this is another tip and trick. They will do this. They will do something a bit unconventional, most likely. But at the end of the day, it's still a personal essay or still a personal paragraph. So with that in mind, you should have a certain set of experiences that you are comfortable writing about, a certain set of experiences that you could relate to, or you should be used to thinking of yourself in a way where it's like, what part of my life can show that I'm an interesting person, that I'm like someone who's willing to learn, someone who learns from my mistakes, someone who overcomes challenges. I don't know how to do the meeting summary, so I'm going to avoid that. But yes, so they might get you to reflect on a picture or a poem. So question from a student. So someone said that they were told not to use the word I. I think that you should use the word I. I disagree with your graders. It's a personal essay. As for the word we should probably be avoided. If you're talking about yourself and the reader, you don't want to bring the reader into this. It should be just for yourself. Another question, what score do you need to get on the Hunter test for them to get you to read your essay? There is no set score. To my knowledge, it's the top 500 grades. So it's really based off of the performance of everyone else. They, for the sake of, increasing accessibility to the test, they might expand the number of essays that they read. I'm not sure. They are not always clear with their standards because they don't necessarily want to give it to test prep companies. So yeah. I'm going to, let's see. Someone also asked if I could explain what well-written means. We're going to get there, but generally well-written means a wide use of vocabulary, descriptive, grammatically correct sentences, and few spelling errors. So we'll get into that a bit more. This is another paragraph that could also serve as a good model for an essay that you can write. So this pocket watch, this is a good personal essay. In general, if you need guidance with writing a personal essay in particular, this is a pretty good option to see what the administration is looking for, or what it means to write a good essay in general. So see if you could model something off of that. And let's see. Again, this is a homework that's asking you to answer in one paragraph. You don't know what the Hunter test could throw at you. You should be comfortable using one paragraph. You should be comfortable writing entire reflective essays. So these are just exercises. I don't really want to repeat myself. Here's another list of topics from prior years. There's an interesting topic. I will elaborate on it. So this essay is interesting. Describe your everyday superhero. Ignore the question mark. That was a typo. But this one's interesting because, again, it's asking you about another person or something external to you as a student. However, like I said, and will continue to repeat, the Hunter essay is about you. Even if you're writing about someone else who is super awesome, like that's great, but you should always prioritize your voice. You should reflect on why they're so meaningful, how they've inspired you, what actions you have taken as a result of observing this person. In parentheses, it says mom or dad. It doesn't have to be mom or dad. Could be anyone, right? Anyone who you see. It could even be the guy at the corner store because he gives you like your breakfast every morning. And one time you saw him like, I don't know, like he's in there since 7 in the morning. He's there until 9 p.m. and you think that that's super inspiring, that amount of hard work, and then you relate it to something in your own life, right? So again, another example. Once you're used to thinking like this, answering the prompts should become easy. Another thing that I would recommend that students do is keep a collection of your old essays. Keep a collection of all the feedback that you have received. Why? Because when you see a crazy prompt, right? Maybe 2019 is like something I consider weird, right? Compare your favorite object to a person. What does that mean? How does that relate to me at all, right? That's a quote unquote crazy prompt. If you have a collection of good essays, maybe you could slightly trim that essay to answer this question. For example, if you wrote the essay, describe your everyday superhero, you already have an essay about someone else. You already have an essay about another person, right? So maybe, it's not your favorite person, or maybe it is your favorite person, but now all you need to do is write a paragraph about how they're similar to some kind of an object. But you have the key parts down. You have a person, you have the way they inspired you. You should have already written how you reflected on their actions. You should have already written how you became a better person because of this. So that's something. Another thing that the Hunter Admissions is looking for is creativity. And with creativity, I will say, an unusual object is great. A disclaimer that I give everyone: don't write anything inappropriate. So all the objects should make sense. Like they shouldn't be like as simple as an office chair, unless you have like a super creative explanation of an office chair, right? Or a printer. I don't know. Maybe it could be something cool like an ornament or a Fabergé egg. Like those are like cool pieces of art. They're like little sculptures. Yeah, but like nothing weird. Also should go without saying, but on the Hunter test, like please avoid severe negative language or sad endings. So like avoid saying things like I can't sleep at night most nights. Even if that's true, that's like considered to be unpleasant and concerning. Please avoid unpleasant and concerning things in your essay, unless, of course, you have a super clear justification. It has been reviewed by a trusted adult, and they say, okay, like you presented this in a sanitary enough way where it's like it doesn't really raise concern. It shows that you overcame a challenge, right? This is done on a case-by-case basis, and so I won't try to name specific examples. But yeah, a funny example would be maybe, let's see. I'm not really going to answer about if you should answer in 2 paragraphs or one. That's a specific to your class. If it says answer in 1 paragraph, answer in 1 paragraph. This is related to chat. But anyways, one time I did write an essay. It was, what is your favorite place? And I wrote my bed. I love to sleep in my bed because it is so warm and comfortable. I feel like it is an escape from real life. Because in reality, like as a 6th grader, I was involved in 3 different sports. I was going to art classes and I had an almost 100% average. Did the person reading my essay know that? No, they just knew I like to sleep. And, if they could tell that I was maybe tired or exhausted from my life, they would say, oh, well, why do we need her in Hunter? Like she's already defeated, So think about what the person reading your essay would think. Even if it's well written, very descriptive, lots of metaphors, no spelling or grammar mistakes. Yeah, that's sometimes not enough, and definitely stay away from anything that could make the reader concerned for you or make them think that you are in some way not the type of person they're looking for. I remember with that essay, Frances read it herself, and she really laid into me. She was like, how could you write something like this? Needless to say, that did not go into the good essay pile, and I did not write about that on the real Hunter test. Trial by fire, had to learn, or better that I learned it that way with Frances than writing it on the test and potentially not getting it. So here's a rubric. This is the rubric that the graders at Kweller use. So whenever you enroll in the class, this is what they're going to give you, and it's going to be out of 10. So with this is not necessarily the rubric that the actual people reading your essay will might use, but it gives you a general sense of how good your writing is, if that makes sense. If you get a 0 out of 3 for grammar slash spelling, like, does it mean that you wrote this like a bad essay? Not necessarily, but for the sake of getting into Hunter, is this an area you should improve on? Yes. I would say good essays usually are, 8 out of 10 or above on this rubric. So that's something to keep in mind. This rubric is not the end all be all, but it definitely shows areas in which you can improve to really ensure that whoever the reader is, they like your essay. Certain categories like usage of vocabulary and vivid imagery, those are a bit more subjective. So those could give you a sense of like, is my essay quality? And something like organization of ideas, that is definitely a necessity in an essay. You need to be able to write clearly. The reader should be able to understand what you are writing. So yes, and address this prompt, even though this is 1 point, if you have a really good essay that doesn't address the prompt, it's kind of pointless, right? So even though it's 1 point out of 10, it's a very necessary point out of 10. Again, just to reiterate, actual Hunter graders, actual people who accept you into Hunter, do they use this rubric? I have no idea. Is it a good rubric for essays overall in general? Yes. This is the visual grading rubric, so it's out of 5. This is another, let's see, this is another rubric that Kweller Prep uses. I think, again, it's a pretty good rubric. So each sentence must have a subject, verb, and predicate, and tenses must be consistent. Those are quite basic grammar rules. So either you have it or you don't, right? Is it the end all be all? Will it guarantee that you get into Hunter if you get all of these points? Not necessarily. Is it a good guide? Yes. So I hope that that is clear to you all. So let me quickly go back to chat. Okay. So these are both good questions. So question 1, when writing an essay, how much should I say? Should I add a lot of details or background knowledge? That's a great question. And I think that we're about to go into, let's see, we'll get to this in a minute. But okay, yes, descriptive essay structure. So when you write, you will be given like this kind of sample structure for your essays. So with the introduction, that should really be, again, assuming you've read the prompt, you understand what they're looking for. The types of information you should provide in the first paragraph are really descriptions of what's going on around you. It should be a way to introduce the reader to your world. It should really get them into your mindset as you're doing something, right? For example, if I'm writing an essay about my favorite object, I could start off with a super beautiful detailed sentence about how like the steam from the tea like goes into my face and clouds my vision. I just see these hazy images of my family talking over the table, passing each other food, and the beautiful smell of whatever it is my mother cooked is like flooding into my nostrils. Like that's great. That's a great introduction. And that is mostly where the sensory descriptions are going to come from. Anything related to context, like explaining, this also says thesis statement or sentence. I think it depends. I think this one depends if it's more of a descriptive essay or a personal essay, how explicit it should be, but definitely answer the prompts no matter what you do. Anyways, the first body paragraph, that should be more towards context if necessary. So maybe in this example that I just said with the eating dinner with my family, I could maybe give some context as to family traditions. I could maybe give some context into why we do this. And I could explain that this happens often. Body paragraph 2 should really be setting up to some sort of, I wouldn't say conflict, but it could be some sort of a conflict or challenge, something that leads up to paragraph 3, which should be explaining a decisive action you took related to the prompt, an epiphany you had, and body paragraph 2 should kind of explain what maybe caused it. And body paragraph 3 should be kind of explaining your thought process and a change that you went through. And then the conclusion would be like these are just some, I guess, structural things. I don't know what advanced level transition word means. I write to conclude, very basic, gets the job done. But I digress. The conclusion should be a thorough reflection, an understanding of yourself as a person, and a so what. Like, why is it important that the reader read your essay? Maybe it's a life lesson you learned that you hope to apply. It's a life lesson you learned that's going to help people in the future, and that's something you value. It's something that you learned about yourself, and you're happy to have learned something about yourself, right? So the context, don't get too caught up in the details. The details are mostly sensory details. They're mostly to like show that you know how to write, and you know how to do something I'm going to discuss now, which is called show don't tell, where you really use visual or maybe other like maybe the smell of something, those kinds of details to explain what you were doing in a particular moment. The actual details, like, does the reader need to know my mom's first and last name, and uh how like she and my aunt like both grew up in a different country, and then like my dad grew up in this country? Like no, like that's not really relevant, right? So the details that you have should be relevant, um and mostly related to certain sensory things to get the reader really immersed in your description, to show them like, wow, like this kid knows a lot of good words and they are relevant to whatever it is that they're writing about. So that's about that. Someone else asked if I'm able to share what my prompt was and what I wrote about. Sure. So my prompt, I was given a choice of two prompts. One of them was talk about your favorite place or something like that, or a lesson you learned. I'm not really sure. The second one was based off of the previous passage, write about a time where you faced some kind of challenge, or maybe someone perceived you in the wrong way and what you did about it. Like, because the character in the story, he was perceived to be not very bright or a not very good writer, and then turns out he was writing with the wrong hand or something, or like he had a mentor who really like helped him. Again, this was a while ago, so I kind of forgot. But with the second paragraph, the gist of my story was that I tried really hard in third grade to be a super good artist, but when I presented my work to the class, I got made fun of, and that motivated me to get better at art. You know, I was clearly embarrassed, but I wanted to prove the haters wrong. And then after a while, like art became my hobby, and I participated in community art events in Queens where I drew like big murals on the chalkboard. Actually, like I drew murals in Hunter as well, funnily enough. If any of you visit the school, or if any of you get in, like you might see my name on the wall with a giant hawk. But again, that was related to my hobbies, my interests, and the reason why that essay was compelling was number one, because I practiced with it a lot. I wrote it initially at Kweller, and the essay had gone through two different versions since then, and I was lucky enough to have a prompt that I could apply that essay to, or slightly tweak the contents of the essay to answer the prompt about, you know, overcoming a challenge or overcoming some kind of misconception. And, you know, I had some funny details in there as well. Like instead of the Mona Lisa, someone called my drawing the Lisa Mona because it looked like the Scream. I mentioned that the person who painted the Scream initially was Edward Munch, and that's not information that I think a lot of people know unless they like are into art history at least a little bit. So I think that that showed a unique perspective. And yeah, it was a good essay overall, and I credit it to the fact that I went to Queller and I practiced a lot. And that essay had been reviewed by a lot of tutors. So I was lucky and ended up working out. That's why I think practice is key. Um, so someone else is asking um, if, let's see, if they got 100 on the test, but not really great on the essay, would they get in? is 100 the guaranteed in. So I think they'd still like read your essay. I can't really comment on that. All I know is that if you meet a cutoff for getting your essay read, I don't think that they necessarily look at scores. I'm not gonna lie. Because they're looking for people who are well-rounded, not necessarily test takers. So please don't bank on getting 100% on the exam. Definitely try for your essay. Definitely talk about your own story. Is it very important to write 5 paragraphs? I think 4 is also okay, depending on your essay, how long it is, and if it makes sense structurally. If you need to write maybe 6, like you have a super large body paragraph that makes sense to break into 2 different body paragraphs, I think that's also fine. Doesn't have to be 3, but you have to tell a story regardless if you are writing an essay. So there's a lot of prompts to prepare for. How many essays did you prepare and what prompts? In terms of, oh no, I made the chat too big. Okay, we're back. In terms of the number of essays I wrote, I think I wrote like between 30 and 50. Like I wrote a lot of essays. How many good essays did I write? Probably like 5, 7 if we're pushing it. Those are not good numbers. So that's between what, like 18% or like between 10 or 18% of my essays, 10 to 20% of my essays were actually somewhat decent. That means you need to write a lot of essays in order to get just at least one decent one, you know? So I hope that that makes sense. I want to also drill in. Practice is key. Write as many as possible. I don't remember the exact prompts. So sorry about that. Other things in the chat. Okay, so there's a lot of questions in the chat. So during the day of the test, you should not write essays. During the day of the test, I hosted a webinar yesterday talking about stress management tips. The day of the test, you should be calm. Don't write any new essays. Don't go over any new material. What you know is what you know. At that point, it's just getting your head in the game because it's a 3-hour long exam and you want to be focused. So prior to the exam, though, write as many as possible and hope for a good one. Did I practice writing on paper or computer? I practiced on paper. I recommend that you write. I wrote all my essays on paper. I recommend that you do that so that, you know, your hand doesn't get a cramp during the exam. Is it safe to memorize an essay if it can be tweaked into any prompt? I like don't memorize it word for word, but that's kind of what I did. I memorized like approximately what each body paragraph said. I memorized any funny or creative lines that I wanted to include, any particular details like that I did remember. So I didn't wasn't like a photographic memory, but I think it's good to remember the good ones and review them before you go into the test. How long should you spend for drafting? So drafting, I wouldn't draft. I would do an outline. So an outline just says, okay, the intro, I'm going to talk about this thing. Body paragraph 1, I'm going to mention like this thing. After that, body paragraph 2 is going to be about something else, right? So just write what like a topic sentence, what it's going to be about. Don't write about the specifics of what's going to be in there. So next question, should you make the end heartwarming so you could get the reader's attention? However you want to call it, like, yes, it should be a so what. It should be something that shows the reader that what you are writing about is meaningful. So maybe you learned a lesson that taught you that you should always try to make the world a better place, even if it's hard to do. You know, that's heartwarming, and it shows that, again, if the rest of your essay was good, it can show like that it's not just, you're not just saying that, it's based off of something real. And I think that maybe a very nice concluding paragraph where you reflect on your actions, that could maybe make up for an essay that wasn't the most descriptive, right? Because you want to show that you're a thinker and you're someone who thinks about your environment, not just yourself. Can you end with a quote to wrap up the lesson you learned? I mean, sure. I don't know if anyone like it should tie into your essay. I think this is a case-by-case basis. Definitely show your grader or your tutor this because I cannot say as a general rule. Because if I say yes and you have a bad quote, I do not want to be responsible for that. can you base your essay off of philosophy or depression? So philosophy is interesting, depression, probably not. I'm not gonna lie. As I said earlier, you don't want to like go into topics that would make the reader concerned or uncomfortable. So there's a lot of questions. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get through them all. How many mock exams did I take in the 2 weeks before the exam? I also did the crash course. So within the crash course, I think I did maybe like 5 or so, 6, something like that. But the week before the exam, or at least 4 days before the exam, I didn't do anything. At that point, it was just review. And at that point, it was mostly strategies, how I could keep my endurance up, how I can remember things that I already learned. At that point, like a few days before the exam, you're probably not going to learn much. What are the worst scores that will be accepted? I don't know. That depends on how like everyone else does. My year was the top 500 essays. This year, I anticipate it would be maybe a bit more, but again, we don't know. Let's see. Okay, when I took the test, how many pages did I have? I don't think that matters. You could always ask for more pages if you run out of room. What is more important, the question or the essay? Like everything is important. You need to get a certain number of questions right to get your essay even read. How should I add visual details? This is a great question. So this relates to something called show don't tell. So what is show don't tell? Show don't tell is the idea that you want to show the reader what you're doing, not just tell them. An example and some kind of prompts that you would be given when you are practicing for the exam would be rewrite this sentence, I walk down the street. Right? Like that, I walk down the street gets the job done, but that doesn't tell the reader how you walk down the street, how you were feeling, right? It could instead of I walk down the street, it's I nervously shuffled my feet, keeping my eyes trained on the floor. My sweaty palms like were stuck to the inside of my jacket and the frigid air like whipped across my face. You know, that's totally different from I walk down the street even without knowing anything else about this like hypothetical essay, this like essay that doesn't exist, right? You can kind of tell that, I am not comfortable walking down this street. I want to go home, right? That is what sensory details do. They tell the reader not just what you're doing, but they're telling the reader how you're doing it, right? So that is what show don't tell means. That is how you are going to incorporate visual details into your writing. Use something called adverbs. How are you walking? Quickly, slowly. Change up the verbs that you're using. Are you using walking or are you using dragging your feet? Are you using walking or are you using sprinting? Are you using shuffling? Are you use like there's so many options, so don't just limit yourself to the very basic words. Um, this is this is like this is the part that really talks about it. So I hope that that was a helpful description. Okay, so how can you get your endurance to be better? So I think that there might be more anti-stress workshops in the future, but that's also covered there. How to get your endurance up. Make sure that you eat a good breakfast. That includes something with protein. That includes something with slow burning carbs like brown rice or whole wheat bread. Don't do anything too sugary like cereal because then you're going to crash. Prior to taking the exam, like right before, if you do need a pick-me-up or an extra boost, like I would say eat fruit. Before you go into the exam, make sure you get a full night of rest. Prior to the exam, make sure you're waking up on time every single day so that you're not waking up at 8 a.m. normally, and then the day of the test, you suddenly wake up at 6 a.m. and then you're super tired and then you can't do the test, right? Make sure you have a consistent sleep schedule and make sure you get a lot of sleep the night before. So those are the main ways. Apart from that, I would say if you ever get stuck or you feel like you're being tired, take a break, like close your eyes, back up, count to 10, breathe in deeply, breathe out deeply, do it maybe 2 or 3 times, just refocus, forget about like anything, like if you're worried about a problem or a question, it's only one question. Just make sure that you are ready to tackle the next one. So that is how you would keep your endurance up. But a lot of it, again, comes down to practice, making sure that you're used to taking tests. Practice, practice, practice. Take as many tests as you can. Take as many essays as you can. Doesn't matter if the insights are not that original, i.e. platitudes, if the essay is well written. I think that it's like, I don't think they expect like someone who's 12 or 11 years old to be crazy profound. I think if the essay is well written and the platitudes relate to what like this person's experiences, to what your experience is, I think that is fine. So do you want the story to be positive? Yes, you want the story to be positive. If it involves a challenge, that's also okay as long as you learn something from it. But yeah, make sure that even if you write about a negative experience, don't make the reader concerned about your well-being and your safety, right? Don't be weird. Just make sure that if there's a challenge, you overcome it and you learn something from it. Okay, can you use a fake situation in case you can't think of an experience related to the prompt? So, yeah, you can. And there's no way to check. Spoiler alert, no one ever made fun of my art growing up. I think I was always a talented artist. So at least when I used to do it. Now, not so much. Now I kind of stopped. That's not really the point. The point is like, yes, I did come up with a fake scenario. Can anyone check me on that? No. Is it believable? Yes. Is it generally harder to make something up? Yes, it is harder to make something up, especially on the spot. So again, if you can't think of something real, like do that as a last resort. It's so much easier to write about things that you have experienced and things that you haven't. You also like, if you're not a very believable writer, maybe stay away from writing about things that did not happen. But yeah, again, practice is key. Make sure that you review your essay or an adult reviews your essay so that, it just sounds very nice and clean. So if you don't have much time at the end of multiple choice questions, should you skip the introduction and most of the conclusion? Uh, no, I think that you should definitely, if anything, you should skip on the last like 5 multiple choice questions or 3 multiple choice questions, whatever, like make sure you have a solid essay. Definitely don't skip the conclusion. If anything, you could skip a body paragraph or two. Maybe make the introduction a sentence or two long just with the hook, grab the reader. Maybe write a body paragraph explaining the situation. In my opinion, the conclusion is super important because that is where you communicate what you learned. That is where you communicate why your lesson is important. Obviously, answer the prompt, but if you have to sacrifice something in your essay for the sake of time, which I recommend you don't do, okay? Write a normal, clean essay. But if you absolutely must, then, just make sure you have the conclusion. Make sure that like admission knows what it is you're talking about. Should the essay be written first? I don't know. I wrote mine second. I did the test in the order in which it was given to me because that is how I always practiced it. If you've been doing the test in a certain order, honestly, stick to it. Don't try to change it weeks leading, or maybe there is time to change it. There's still time to practice. But yeah, I generally don't think that you should try anything new the day of the exam. So is there anything else? Am I going to share a copy of the presentation? I'm not, I don't know. That is something for Francis Kweller to decide. Probably not. Is the skill level, if the skill level is overly high, will it be weird or strange? I don't think that is like, I don't know if that's necessarily possible. Write to the best of your ability. That's not weird or strange. When I'm talking about weird or strange, I'm talking about like something that like makes people concerned for your well-being. Maybe ask your parents for better guidance on that. How can you get better handwriting? Practice. Anything else that is new? How long should the conclusion be? I can't give you an estimate on the number of sentences as long as you communicate the message. And then these are just things that the rest is something that your tutors can answer. Okay, so I gave you guys like my best rundown of how to write the Hunter essay. Obviously, if you have any more questions, you should reach out to Francis Kweller. You should also, if you're taking the class, especially the crash course, which I recommend, you should talk to your tutors and your graders. Above all, practice is key. Above all, make sure your essay tells the administration something about you. Thank you so much, everyone. And I will be leaving the webinar here. Good luck, and I hope you all pass on your test. So let me end the thing.